Hey everybody, welcome back to RetroGames. So today we're going to continuing series on the Steam Deck, more importantly how to get some of your favorite console emulators set up on your Steam Deck for that amazing portable on-the-go experience that you can also dock and play from your couch. And of course, it wouldn't be a tutorial series if we didn't talk about the Super Nintendo, and that's what we're going to be asking today. How do you get that Super Nintendo emulator set up on your Steam Deck? Before we get too far involved, if you do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe. That notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. Now, Super Nintendo emulation has been around for a very long time. This is going to be one of the easier tutorials, but I understand that for some people this might be the first time you're getting into it, or if you've been doing it for a while, maybe you want to see how to set it up on the Steam Deck. Right off the top, whatever games you have, you should own them, and you can go ahead and get those zip files here. Now you can use the zip files in this emulator. If you go to the EmuDeck GitHub page, it's going to show you all the emulators that EmuDeck will install, whether or not they need BIOS files, and what formats your games can be in. And you'll see those headings at the top. But if we go ahead and scroll, you'll get an entire list of everything that is here. But if we go down to Super Nintendo Entertainment System, you're going to see that there is no BIOS file required, and it's going to give you a list of the type of file extensions you're able to use. Now I always just unzip my files. I have seen every once in a while a zip file have problems where the unzip file has never once given me any issue whatsoever. So my recommendation is just to unzip them. These are very tiny files, so it's really not a storage space concern compared to getting to something like BinQ versus CHD on a CD-ROM system. But just go ahead and copy those games you want to bring over to your Steam Deck onto any external storage media you have. Now I teach these tutorials with just a simple thumb drive USB because I feel like most people are going to have that, and you're going to need a dock for it or some way to get that USB into your Steam Deck. Now if you want a tutorial on something like FTP or other file transfer methodologies for the Steam Deck, leave me a comment down below and maybe I will make that in the future, but for now I can't recommend a dock enough. But when we get over to desktop mode and we plug that removable storage media in, you're going to see mount and open, and that's what you're going to use. And then whatever you dragged over to your removable storage device will be there. I had folders for a couple different tutorials I was working on, but if we go into Super Nintendo here, you will see all the games from my personal collection. I want to move over to Steam Deck, and you will see that some are marked as Japan and some are marked as US. That's not going to matter whatsoever. These are all going to be perfectly fine within emulation, but there are a few different folders you can put them in case you want to keep your Super Famicom games separate from your Super Nintendo games. For me personally, I put them all in one folder, and that folder is wherever you installed EmuDeck. You're going to go into the ROMs folder, and you're going to scroll down until you get to the S's. All of the systems are alphabetical by their console name and not by their manufacturer. You'll see we have SNES and SFC. SFC is for Super Famicom. If you wanted to put your Japanese games in there, you could. I put everything in the one SNES folder because I think it's just easier for ease of use, and honestly, different name, same platform. Once you paste whatever files from your collection you want in there, you can go ahead and just back out of it. But just remember, like I said earlier, no BIOS file whatsoever required for this on your Steam Deck. So to get the games into your Steam Deck on more of that handheld operating system mode, you're going to go into EmuDeck, go down to Tools, and you're going to launch Steam ROM Manager. Just remember that it does change your controls ever so slightly, so read that warning there. And you will see that by default all of the parsers are turned on, so as long as they're all on, if you just hit preview and generate app list, it's going to check the files in all of those folders, see what is new, and add it here for you. And if you have a lot of stuff on your Steam Deck like I do, if you go to filter by category and select Super Nintendo, you're going to see all of the games that we added, including the Japanese versions. It'll just show up as Super Nintendo on your Steam Deck, and honestly, does that really matter? But if you're a purist or technically you want that secondary folder, SFC will work for you. It will auto-ingest art, and sometimes it pulls up art I don't like. I like a uniform look, so just go ahead and hit that right arrow until you find a piece of art that you like for the game title and for your personal aesthetic, and once that is complete, just go ahead and head below and hit Save App List. That's done in real time. Once it says done adding removing entries, you can go ahead and close that back out of the EmuDeck setup and return to gaming mode to get to where those games should be looking nice and pretty. And I've never mentioned this before, but if you do want to change the artwork on any of your games, you can just head back into the EmuDeck setup and go into the ROM Manager and select new artwork. You can always change it depending on whether or not you've grown tired of what you have, but I will say all of the artwork here looks absolutely spectacular. But let's get into a game and start talking about what the emulation settings that we can articulate are. Now I am going to say one thing before we start. If you've never played Demon's Crest and you like my channel, you owe it to me to try it. This is an absolutely spectacular Metroidvania style game made by Capcom within the Ghosts and Goblins universe. It is one of my favorite games of all time, and I cannot recommend it enough. You have to play this game, do it for me, and if you have played it, leave me a comment down below and tell me how you feel about it, because it's one of my favorite Super Nintendo games of all time. But let's head into the settings and see what options we have here. And there are more than one option for Super Nintendo emulation. By default, it's SNES9X, and that is what I stick with. I can't recommend it enough, but if you want to play around, there are other options in there. Just remember that the options I'm showing you will change if you change the core. You have different aspect ratios, and you do need to play around in the RetroArch video settings if you want to do stuff like integer scaled. This is usually just left default, and I think that is best. You might get a couple extra pixels, but if you want to do integer scaling, you probably don't need this video because you know where it is. It's going to, by default, crop some of the overscan area that would be underneath CRT bezels, and you have something like high-res blending that is required for a certain few games, but honestly, what I really like just to play around with are some of these CRT filters. They're a lot of fun and give you a weird new look at the game. Now, none of this is accurate to what you would expect if you played it on a real TV, but they look really nice, so if you want your games to look like they're running on S-Video, you do have those options, and you'll see here under Audio Interpolation, you have a lot of different options. Gaussian kind of emphasizes the bass, and I like that, but if something doesn't sound right to you, you can play around with those. And then you have emulation hacks as well. If you want to do Super FX, you can overclock the chips in software there to get a better frame rate out, and some homebrew games need things pivoted around. You will probably never touch these whatsoever, but they are in there, and if you are dealing with super effects, that overclock menu is going to be super important. But again, I just had a lot of fun playing around with the video settings. Something like Castlevania here, Super Castlevania 4 to be specific, it kind of has a whole new vibe in monochromatic black and white. Now, of course, this is not how the game was meant to be presented, but it just gives it a whole fresh new feel that might be interesting to you. I played a few levels, and while some of the details get lost because obviously they use specific colors to demarcate specific things on screen, it is just a fun time to play around with because honestly the setup guide is relatively simple unless you're new to emulation. I wanted to show you guys a little bit more fun option, but I will say the sound in this emulator on Steam Deck is amazing, so go ahead and listen to Mega Man 8 for like 45 seconds and I'll come back and finish the setup video. But enjoy! Such an iconic soundtrack, and it sounds so great on the Steam Deck. But the fun thing about Super Nintendo is maybe some of these experiences you haven't had before. Something like Chrono Trigger here, one of the best role-playing games of all time in my opinion. You bump into somebody, she loses her pendant, and this is going to kick off one of the biggest and most epic 16-bit JRPG adventures you're ever going to go on. And now we can do it in the palm of our hands with the Steam Deck. I have an original copy of Chrono Trigger. I've loved the game, but being able to play on the go on the Steam Deck is a fun new way to experience things, and that is why I wanted to do this setup tutorial, even though it's not the hardest thing in the world. But I get it, not everyone has the knowledge of everyone else, and some people really do want step-by-step tutorials for the non-CD cores, and I get to talk about fun and interesting settings you can articulate to get a little bit different of an experience out of your Steam Deck. And of course, there's stuff that never came over to the US that you can experience, like Super Bomberman 4 and 5. We got 1 and 2 in the US, but 3, 4, and 5 never came over here, and I love looking at my original collection of Super Bomberman games on the shelf. But again, I'm going to reiterate one thing on this video. If I helped you in any way, shape, or form get this score set up, go ahead and play Demon's Crest. That is what you owe me for having done this. I will tell everyone until I'm blue in the face, if you've never played Demon's Crest, you 100% have to do it. But if you follow the steps to this tutorial, you'll be playing Super Nintendo on your Steam Deck and it will be amazing. Don't forget, you have to have the original console and the original games to make it allowable. Short of that, I'll be back next week with another video on Steam Deck. I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but if you want a specific tutorial and haven't done it yet, leave me a comment down below. Bye-bye.